I'm going to sort of introduce OneModel a bit and then turn it over to Chris to talk about a solution that we built out with one of our customers. And to introduce OneModel, I wanted to go back to something that Al had said at the very beginning of the conference yesterday as he was giving his opening. He talked about a couple of things. One of them was sort of meshing together, technology, operations, and strategy, and coming out and how we all have an obligation to try to get through all of those things. For OneModel, we really focus on the technology. So if you're trying to solve an analytics problem, if you're thinking about the strategy, the operations, where we can really come in is handling all of the technology pieces that go into delivering that analytics product. And so for us, that comes through getting the data out of your tools, organizing it into a coherent model, no matter how many different data sets you have. Like any analytics vendor, we have dashboards, we have data exploration. We also put a big focus on securing that data so the right people see the right things, which is often an overlooked challenge as you go through that process. We also have machine learning and data science. You can check that off your roadmap and start to deploy that right away. And the whole thing is flexible. And that's really the thing to emphasize is viewing ourselves as a technology provider. We're not going to try to do that full stack of here's the strategy, operations, and technology all in one package, and that's all you need to do for people analytics. That's ridiculous. You're going to need to kind of mix and match and take all of this in your own direction as you go. So that's kind of the spirit of how to think about it. The other thing we wanted to do is rather than just talk about OneModel, I'll do that for a bit, but we wanted to talk about how we used it to solve an actual problem. So kind of the so what side of all of this. We're going to talk about a scenario with one of our customers, because then you'll be able to see, he kind of did that overlay. You'll be able to see the technology going into the operations, going into the strategy. So with that, just a few thoughts on how we've done the technology piece. So maybe you can take that away as some insights about what to look for as you talk to your own IT team, as you talk to other vendors. We make everything that we do really transparent, sometimes to a fault. So I'll get on and do an analytics demo with prospects, and I'll show them some really beautiful SQL code rather than some visualizations to start off. And if they stay on the phone, I'll talk about how this is important, where even we don't expect our customers to come in and build their own data models. Like, we have support for that. We have a team of fantastic experts. But what we do expect is they'll have some curiosity about how it works, and they'll want to pop the hood and see what's going on underneath. So we focus here on transparency in how we structure the data. Even if you can't read it, it feels good to know it's there. We're not hiding anything from them. We want to be an open technology provider. We do the same thing with machine learning. So the things that Chris is going to talk through in here, we expose all of it. And so it's an easy interface to order up a predictive model, and I can do that. And I ran one to predict whether the Vikings would run or pass on a given play, just to kind of test things out. So I can order up a model. But if you're a data scientist and you understand all of this stuff, you can actually go through and order particular models for particular scenarios without doing a lot of coding. So again, it's technology that isn't going to just try to put you in a box and solve the whole thing. It's technology that's going to allow you to build on top of it. That's sort of the spirit here as well, as we would expect that you would want to have technology that can work with everything else that you have, that you don't want your data to just kind of live in one beautiful application. You want your data to say, well, my finance team's using some Power BI, or we're bringing in Snowflake, we have an enterprise data strategy, so we need to push all of that out. So that's sort of the spirit and how we have put things together. What Chris is going to take you through is OneAI. So this is how we do predictive modeling, how we develop models based on our customers' unique data. Chris, anything I missed in the intro before we dive into the problem?
No, you're all good.
All right. Now, now we're going to kind of move into the so what, right? So we have technology, it's open, it's great. We had pictures of Redshift, whatever. So what? Is that a problem we solve?
Absolutely, and we'll walk through a customer challenge, but the big piece, we're using this flexible architecture and how it's coming together to really get at some different scenarios that are moving beyond kind of the normal turnover type pieces that people are doing. But the big thing about that OneAI architecture is it is very bespoke and custom to the data set, to the customer that's feeding through that. So the models can be wildly different from customer to customer. It's not a one size fits all. So we get a lot of different scenarios that come to us from customers and the challenges that they're looking to solve. One recently that was we found pretty cool to work through was helping them solve the challenge that they had around keeping a steady state headcount. So really looking at the tactical of in the workforce planning of how do how do they make sure that they've got enough people, they're not overspending, not too many requisitions, and they're not, they don't have vacant positions where they, there's a real need to have people in place. So this was a company that was growing very quickly and, overshot a little bit and needed to steady state for a while. And involved their analytics team to really help do this. They didn't have a bespoke workforce planning team. It was the core analytics guys that were moving through. So that was the challenge, how to do that and how to really stay as close as possible to that number. So they were addressing these plans on a weekly basis as they moved through, and additionally really trying to help dive into some of the attrition risk pieces so that that supply challenge became smaller over time. All right, so in doing so, there were kind of two core pieces that we needed to predict in that fashion. Really what that overall attrition rate was going to be, so how many people are we losing that we're going to have to go and fill, and then the individual fill rates for each of those requisitions. So for both the ones that were already open as well as any that they were going to open, what did that look like? And that really varies differently across regions, position, everything else that had to be taken into account there. So they're the things that we're gonna look at, and then that weekly adjustment, having this run on a regular basis was really key to how they really kept on target. So we are looking at that scenario of keeping a steady state, but really if you've got a target number out there for future growth, you're kind of just adjusting some of the numbers to be able to hit that. All right, so predicted attrition, predicted requisitions filled should get us to our target headcount. Ultimately, if we show kind of the end state of what the numbers look like, and I've made up some numbers here, but some of the rates are pretty close. If we had 3,000 people, 56 at the end of the day are going to leave in September, 70 in October. So we've got that gap that we're filling. We know generally what the fill time for a lot of these positions are in those different regions, and I'm just using kind of an average right here. But at the end of the day, what we had to open was at least 80 requisitions in September, and they were actually meted out on a weekly basis. So to hit that right point in time, every week we knew exactly just what needed to be open. All right, so there's a couple parts to this, obviously across those elements. The attrition rate piece, there were actually three different predictive models that were coming together to form what that rate was for the department or the region that we were looking at. And this was actually deployed across, I think it was about 10 different departments and regions that were broken out as being the pieces they needed to look at. So if we're looking at attrition rate, there were 30 different predictive models that were coming together to provide that view across the organization. So there's a couple different pieces here that were built in. There's a forecasting element that's more like a normal math forecast, regression type piece. We actually integrated Facebook's profit library, which is pretty cool from a data science perspective. So that gave kind of a really good projection on a basic math view, but we also utilized the automated machine learning tool sets with their own regression pieces to dive deeper and actually explain more of the drivers that were coming out of that as well. That was augmented at the end with the attrition risk predictions. So each employee was given an overall attrition risk, and that was updated every week as it moved through, and that actually feeds back as a feature into those first two models. So as we looked at aggregate statistics, those pieces were coming back in to help inform as another data feature there. So that was pretty cool. What you see at the end of the day is that those two pieces generated different models that we ended up combining across those elements. So they have quite a good level of configurability that we can kind of focus on simple forecasts like we have on the left, right through to really taking into account kind of massive seasonability and change and moving those pieces through. So what that brought out at the end of the day, you can see the numbers down the bottom in terms of what we're actually projecting there, what that turns out to be in terms of headcount. We mentioned our 50 and our 70 over those months. And this is what it looks like. So Phil showed, one of those tools actually set up in the OneAI engine. So looking at, in this case, kind of the time to fill calculations of what's there. So there were, 10 different models for each of those regions, and we're actually feeding the unknown requisitions back in so that we can, the yet to be opened requisitions, so we can predict what we think that's going to be. But that's all run and orchestrated as part of that engine. So it's scheduled to run every week, all feeding back in as data points, and at the end of the day, we're getting a bunch of information about what it's producing in that process. So its job is to really give us transparency into what's going on and what's coming out at the end of the day. And we'll circle back to some drivers and that sort of thing that come out of those models as well. But the second piece is really looking at the requisition time. So they already had open requisitions. If some are taking longer to fill, there's going to be open requisitions continue into the next month. So we're still looking to predict what it's going to take to actually fill those, as well as the new ones that we're opening there. So that's really more that 1AI regression where we're looking across and using kind of the automated pieces to really find the best fit of that model itself. And generating kind of those numbers that we needed at the end of the day in terms of this is what it's going to take to fill. The third part was really looking at that turnover to minimize that supply. So at the same time, they had a parallel initiative to keep their higher quality employees and what they were measuring that as. So a parallel piece to go back and really look at kind of the people they wanted to retain or at risk there and put programs in place. Ideally, that minimizes that over time. What has been cool as we've been generating, even on those regressions, is it's been able to generate a bunch of additional statistics and kind of insights into what's actually causing the drivers of not only at the aggregate level that we're seeing for these departments, but also at the employee level that we showed just before. So it's helped kind of narrow in on for each of those regions really what's been important as they look at that. And it's done so really looking at kind of the individual drivers as well as providing more of a multivariate output that they can look at as well. And additional statistics that it goes through and really provides as much transparency as we can in that process. So at the end of the day, that's what we were looking at. With 3 models for attrition. There were another 2 models for looking at time to fill across 10 different departments. There were 50 different predictive models across that organization, all coming together and running weekly to be able to generate what these expected requisition openings were that we needed. And we hadn't really done anything on kind of that sort of scale with organizations before, but it was a really cool use case to take some of the new pieces that we'd built and really apply it to some of those problems. And that really was enabled by the flexibility that we built in that engine and how you can really apply it to any target in that process. All right, that's us. Any questions? Or are we done?
Time for questions.
All right.